Fair Play, a novel by Pete Fisher. Chapter 26, The Big Trip, Part 2. Sophia sat down on her bar stool again. She drew it a little closer to Martin. Her body language was clear. Martin had already had quite a few drinks. He was finding it hard to resist. "This is my last night. I'm leaving tomorrow. I'm getting the train to Cologne." Sophia was not impressed. "You like a German girl?" "I like all kinds of girls." Sophia laughed. "I met her in England." He shouldn't have said anything. Martin realised from her sour expression that this wasn't what Sophia wanted to hear. She might even have been a bit jealous. "Do you smoke?" Martin thought it was a silly question and held up the lighted cigarette in his hand. "Yeah, of course I do." Sophia leant over and whispered, "No, I mean, do you want a joint?" "Ah, yes I do, but not here." "We go for a walk." Sophia stood up and waited for Martin to empty his glass. Then she slipped her arm through his. She led him towards the beach. They walked away from the glass pyramid disco along the warm sand for about 100 metres. They stopped next to where the sun loungers were stacked neatly, ready for the next day. Sophia took one. Martin helped her set it up sideways on to the sea so they could gaze at the waves. From her leather handbag, Sophia got out her cigarettes, some papers, and a small plastic zip bag with some black hash. She began to roll a joint on the sun lounger's flat surface. Martin looked out to sea. "This is beautiful." Martin felt like he was in some enchanted place. Sophia chuckled and licked the long paper. "You like Italy, huh?" "I love it. I want to live here." "So why you don't stay?" "I don't know. My job, my girlfriend, my band. I'd have to give them all up." "Come on. In Italy you can really learn to cook. Forget about your girlfriend. She's German. You can make another band here. There are so many clubs and bars you can play." Sophia lit the spliff, took a hit, and passed it to Martin. After a couple of tokes, he passed it back. He began to think about what she'd said. "You make it sound so easy, so simple." Sophia put her arm round him and drew him closer. "It is. You can stay with me. I help you find a job." She fished again in her stylish handbag and produced 2 miniatures, Italian brandy. She handed one to Martin, opened the other, and took a swig. "Salute!" Martin clinked his little bottle against hers, cracked it open, and took a swallow of the fruity cognac. This was getting dangerous, he thought. What if she really was trouble, like Lucas said? She was gorgeous, though. There was no doubt about that. Drop-dead gorgeous. They really did get on well, too. He hadn't laughed like that with a girl for a long time. Maybe ever. They talked a lot. Of course, the hash and the brandy had kicked in now. But it wasn't just that. How would he feel the next morning if he spent the night with Sophia? What if he made up some excuse and stayed a few more days here? What if he just burned his bridges altogether and took the plunge with Sophia? He didn't have to be home for another week anyway. While he was pondering all this, Sophia had rolled another small joint. They passed it to each other without saying much. Finally Martin buckled. He turned and kissed Sophia. They lay down side by side on the narrow sunbed, kissing passionately. They giggled in between when one of them nearly fell off. Martin wanted to stay there all night, but it was pretty uncomfortable. "You want to come to my flat?" Martin didn't dare to reply at first. "Ah, Sophia, this is so wonderful. I love being with you, but Martin was quite high and a little drunk, but he didn't feel brave. He chickened out. "If I stay with you, I'll get into trouble, Sophia. Luca will be angry. He's been so kind to me. My girlfriend will be pissed off with me too." Sophia sat up on the lounger, looking angry. She didn't pull her punches. "Fuck Luca, he hates me now. Do what you want, not what other people want. You can tell your stupid girlfriend you met a real woman, an Italian girl. I don't ask all the men to come to my house. Don't think that. I really like you, Martin. It was so nice with you tonight. You are a very kind and gentle English man. You must stay, please." Sophia's anger had turned to sadness. Her huge eyes glistened as if she was about to cry. Martin hugged her close and caressed her head. Then he lifted her chin, held her face gently between his hands, and spoke softly to her. "Sophia, I'm such a coward. I'm frightened I wouldn't like it if I stayed here. I love the idea of living in Italy, but I've lived in England all my life. I can't speak Italian. I'm not a great chef. They'd laugh at me here. I know if I stayed with you, I'd want to stay for always. I keep finding reasons why I shouldn't. Please don't be angry. I have to go. I can't stay with you." "But you don't have to go if you don't really want to." Sophia had softened. She wasn't the bitch Luca had made her out to be. She was really a very warm and very sweet young lady. She pulled out a pen and a scrap of paper from her bag. She wrote down her phone numbers and her addresses and handed the slip to Martin. "If you don't want to go back tomorrow, you change your mind, you just call me, okay?" Sophia did the Italian call me gesture. Martin kissed her again and put the slip in his back pocket. They started walking back along the beach. Martin put his arm around her shoulders. She put her arm around his waist. Sophia lived next to the marina. Martin walked her back to her flat, and they stood outside her door. One more passionate kiss. The water glistened with reflections of the lights in the houses along the quay. The rows of yachts and fishing boats rocked gently at their moorings. The silence was broken now and then by the clink of rigging rattling against the masts. Martin and Sophia held each other close. "Buon viaggio, Englishman. Arrivederci, bella donna." Martin walked away slowly, turning briefly to wave. His heart pounded as he saw her wave back. She looked more beautiful than ever. At least he had her phone number. It wasn't too late to change his mind. Martin was on his 3rd pint bottle of delicious cold German Pilsner. He was at Marilyn's friend George's basement flat in his parents' house. Marilyn sat on the carpet next to him, while 3 of George's musician friends sat on the sofa and chairs. George sat at the small dining table, loading the bong. He'd only just built it that afternoon. George was a medical student with a knack for adapting laboratory glassware for recreational purposes. George lit up the bowl and took a hit. He exhaled a huge cloud of blue smoke. Phew, das knallt. He passed the bong to Martin. Take care, my friend, it works. Martin had smoked a bong before, but on this evening he was exhausted. He'd hardly slept on the night train. In all the excitement, he hadn't really eaten. The bong tasted good, fresh glass, clean water. He felt fine for a few minutes, but then he felt more and more stoned. He began to feel sick. Just going to get some fresh air, okay? That bong finished me off. Martin went upstairs, out of the front door, and sat down on the doorstep. The house was one of a series of ticky-tacky suburban dwellings that all looked the same. Immaculate front gardens and clean, shiny cars in the concrete drive. No people in sight. It was getting dark, and there was a disturbing, distant roar. The hash seemed to get stronger in the fresh air. Martin began to feel paranoid. He didn't know where he was, or who he was, or what that terrible roaring noise was. Marilyn came out just in time and did the walk and talk thing. She began marching Martin round the block. Gradually his paranoia dissipated. He felt reassured by her presence. When they got back to George's place, Martin was still disturbed by that roar. What is that noise I can hear all the time? That roaring sound, it just won't go away. Marilyn laughed. That's just the cars on the Autobahn. It's only a kilometre from here. The wind carries the noise this way, so it sounds really close. Oh, thank God for that. Martin stood up suddenly. He walked quickly along to next door's front garden and threw up violently over their neat flower bed. What a great start to a romantic week. Marilyn took it all philosophically. They went back inside and downstairs to George's flat. Everyone laughed. George showed him the spare room. Martin immediately crashed out on the bed without saying goodnight to anyone. A day in the art museum. To clear his head, Martin stared at the huge painting on the wall in front of him. He felt like he was being sucked into it, backwards. Like the floating figure it depicted between shafts of sunlight emanating from the centre. One of the main motifs was the end of a goods train. Quite what the others signified was a mystery to Martin. The painting blended into the surreal feeling that lingered long after that bong and too many trains. Salvador Dali's La Gare de Perpignan. He'd been staring at the masterpiece for at least half an hour. Martin spent most of the last weekend of his holiday in bed with Marilyn. She drove Martin down to her place in Trier, a small penthouse flat in the old part of town. She had a sleeping platform, only accessible via a wooden ladder. Getting down was a little adventurous after too much red wine. In the mornings, Martin woke to the sound of church bells and birdsong, carried on the breeze through the skylight window. They roamed around the ruins of the Roman imperial baths. They went for a drink in one of the dimly lit bars in the old town. There were candles in wax-dripped wine bottles and little night lights on all the tables. Martin liked how your tab was marked on your beer mat. Drink now, pay later. On the last morning, Martin wondered if he'd ever be back. He struggled to hold back the tears. Marilyn fared only slightly better. She packed him off with some sandwiches and a packet of chocolate biscuits. The train began to pull out. He watched Marilyn get smaller as she waved from the platform. She disappeared from view. He settled down in his seat and began to think. He thought a lot on that train as it rolled along the picturesque Moselle River Valley and through the green rolling hills of the beautiful Eifel region. Martin gazed in wonder at fairy tale castles precariously perched atop sheer rocky cliffs, impossibly steep vineyard slopes. The road and railway ran parallel to the river. Huge, long, heavy barges glided on the water, their gunnels skimming the surface defiantly. Small towns and villages clustered on the river's banks. It resembled the kind of giant model train set Martin had dreamt of as a kid.